No one asked Alex Eala to play this match. She had nothing to prove, nothing to gain in the rankings, and every physical reason in the world to say no. She said yes anyway. On August 27th, on the biggest tennis stadium on Earth, Alex Eala is walking onto Arthur Ashe for a match that means nothing on paper and, if you actually look closely at what it represents, might mean everything. Let's start with exactly what this event is, because the name exhibition undersells just how significant a stage this actually is. On Thursday, August 27th, at 6 o'clock in the evening, the USTA will host Stars of the Open, presented by Chase, inside Arthur Ashe Stadium, an exhibition event featuring some of the most promising young stars in tennis. This year's lineup brings together American stars Iva Jovic and Lerner Tien, alongside Brazil's João Fonseca, a quarter-finalist at this year's French Open, and Alexandra Eala of the Philippines, described plainly by the tournament's own promotional materials as the highest-ranked Filipino player in WTA history. That's the billing. 4 of the most talked-about young players in the entire sport gathered together 3 days before the actual tournament begins on a court that seats 23,700 people, by far the largest stage in Grand Slam tennis. This isn't some overlooked side event tucked away on an outer court. It's happening on the same stadium where Grand Slam finals are decided under the same lights, in front of a crowd that will fill a significant portion of that massive bowl, specifically to watch matches that don't count for a single ranking point. And that's precisely what makes the framing, "nobody asked her to play this," worth sitting with for a moment, because it's technically true, and also completely misleading at the same time. Nobody forced her hand. There's no ranking obligation, no contractual requirement buried somewhere in her WTA membership that says top players must appear at exhibition events. This is entirely voluntary, entirely optional, and entirely hers to have declined if she or her team had decided the risk wasn't worth it. Instead, she said yes, and understanding exactly why requires understanding both what this event actually is and what it's historically meant for the players who've appeared in it. Let's talk about the history of Stars of the Open first, because it tells you a lot about the company Eala is now keeping. This isn't a new, hastily assembled sideshow. It's become one of the signature events of US Open Fan Week, a night that in recent years has featured a genuinely staggering collection of tennis royalty. The 2024 edition brought together Iga Swiatek and Sebastian Corda in a mixed doubles scrimmage against Italians Jasmine Paolini and Matteo Berrettini, while legendary Argentines Juan Martín del Potro and Gabriela Sabatini teamed up against Andy Roddick and Caroline Wozniacki. The most jaw-dropping pairing that year saw John McEnroe and Novak Djokovic face off against Carlos Alcaraz and Andre Agassi. Together, the 4 combined for a whopping 43 Grand Slam titles on a single court, for an exhibition, for fun. The 2025 edition kept that same energy, bringing out legends Venus Williams, John McEnroe, and Andre Agassi, alongside young stars Coco Gauff, fresh off her latest Roland Garros crown, and rising Brazilian talent João Fonseca. The lineup that year read like a Grand Slam roll call, and it's worth noting exactly how that event is typically described. It's positioned specifically as a lighter answer to the more competitive fare offered elsewhere during Fan Week, a night built around joy and showmanship rather than the grinding intensity of tournament tennis. Players compete in short-format matches, mic'd up so fans can hear their personalities in real time, with surprise celebrity cameos woven throughout. Past editions have seen NBA star Jimmy Butler hustling on the ball crew and singer Sebastian Yatra dueling it out on court alongside Carlos Alcaraz and Francis Tiafoe. So when Eala's name appears on this year's lineup alongside Jovic, Tien, and Fonseca, what's actually being confirmed isn't just she's playing one more match before the tournament. It's confirmation that the sport's biggest institutional stage now considers her one of its headline attractions for a night specifically built around showcasing the players tennis wants the world paying attention to next. That's a meaningfully different category of validation than simply being a good player with a strong ranking. It's an invitation into a very small, very curated club. Let's actually look at who else got that invitation this year, because the company she's keeping tells its own story. Iva Jovic, at just 18, is the youngest player in the WTA top 20 and the fourth highest-ranked American woman in the world, sitting behind only Coco Gauff, Jessica Pegula, and Amanda Anisimova. Lerner Tien has achieved a career-high ranking of 15 after reaching the Australian Open quarterfinals this year. João Fonseca reached the quarterfinals of this year's French Open. These aren't journeymen filling out a lineup card. These are, by every measure available, the four names tennis has decided represent the sport's most exciting near future, gathered onto the same court, on the same night, 3 days before the tournament that actually matters begins. Now here's where this story gets genuinely complicated, because that same week, tennis media turned sharply critical of exactly this decision. Adding an exhibition match against Iva Jovic at the US Open is a major mistake and could cost her chances at the Grand Slam, read one widely circulated piece, laying out in stark terms exactly why this particular commitment, stacked on top of an already brutal summer schedule, might represent a genuine strategic error rather than a harmless bit of extra visibility. The math behind that criticism is worth revisiting, because it's not vague hand-wringing, it's a specific, calculable claim. That means Eala will have to play what is essentially 8 weeks of tennis in a row, dating back to the Washington Open, if she gets to the second week of the US Open. That is unsustainable for anyone, no matter what your age, and it's hard not to see that as a major error for the burgeoning 21-year-old. That criticism didn't come from anonymous social media accounts. It came from inside professional tennis journalism, published days before the exhibition itself, specifically naming this exhibition slot as a contributing factor to a workload multiple analysts have described as genuinely dangerous heading into the biggest tournament of her career. So we're left with two completely legitimate, completely opposing readings of the exact same event. On one side, this is validation, recognition, an invitation into tennis's most exclusive showcase alongside 3 of the sport's biggest rising names, on the sport's biggest stage, for a night built around celebration rather than competition. On the other side, this is one more physical commitment layered onto a body that's already shown visible signs of fatigue in a summer that's already cost her a match in Cincinnati specifically because she ran out of gas in the closing stretch of a third set. Both of those readings are true simultaneously, and I think that tension is exactly what makes August 27th worth paying attention to, regardless of which side of the debate you find more convincing. Let's talk about the physical reality first, because it's the part of this story grounded in the hardest evidence. Eala has played more than anyone else on the WTA Tour this year, and her schedule shows no signs of slowing down at the Cincinnati Open and the final Grand Slam of the year. That volume caught up with her recently in the most visible way possible. In her most recent tournament before this exhibition, she led world number 10 Amanda Anisimova by a set and built a 2-0 lead in the deciding set, only to lose 6 of the next 7 games as her opponent's serve found its rhythm in the closing stretch. By her own team's account, and by direct reporting from Filipino outlets covering the match, she simply ran out of gas after weeks of non-stop. Elite-level tennis, stretching back through a maiden title in Washington, and a physically bruising campaign in Toronto. That's the body Eala is bringing onto Arthur Ashe Stadium for a night of exhibition tennis. Not fresh, not rested. A body that has, by multiple independent, credible accounts, already shown the early signs of accumulated fatigue catching up with elite-level performance. Adding a match, even a shortened, lower-intensity exhibition format, onto a schedule already described by tennis journalists as unsustainable, is not a neutral decision. It's a calculated risk, taken with eyes open, at a moment when the stakes of getting that calculation wrong have never been higher. But let's actually understand why that calculated risk might be worth taking anyway, because dismissing this purely as reckless scheduling misses half the picture entirely. Think about what an invitation to stars of the Open actually represents in terms of institutional signaling. Tournament organizers, the USTA, and the sport's biggest broadcast and sponsorship partners don't build a marquee showcase event around players they consider peripheral. They build it around the players they believe the audience most wants to see, the names capable of selling tickets to a night that carries 0 competitive stakes on its own merit. That Eala's name sits on this year's roster, alongside 3 players whose rankings and results this season have made them among the most talked-about young stars in the entire sport, tells you something concrete about where the institution of tennis currently places her, independent of anything that happens once the actual tournament starts. There's also a financial dimension worth understanding, one that connects directly to a story that's been building around her all year. Tickets for Stars of the Open start at $30, with a portion of proceeds benefiting the USTA Foundation, the organization's national philanthropic arm supporting tennis and educational programs for underserved youth. Every player appearing on that court is, in a very real sense, helping drive charitable revenue simply by being someone fans are willing to pay to see, even in a format that offers no ranking points and no direct prize money attached to victory. That's a different kind of value than a paycheck. It's cultural capital, translated into ticket sales for a cause bigger than any single match. And there's a subtler, more personal layer to this too, one that's easy to overlook if you focus purely on the scheduling controversy. Iva Jovic isn't a random opponent handed to Eala by a tournament draw. She's described specifically as Eala's friend in coverage of this exact matchup. That detail matters because it reframes what this night actually is at its core. This isn't a competitive collision between 2 players jockeying for position in a ranking system. It's 2 young, rapidly rising stars who genuinely know each other, sharing a stage that the sport has decided belongs to exactly this kind of rising talent in a format specifically designed to let personality and joy take center stage rather than grinding competitive tension. That's worth remembering when weighing whether this appearance was worth the physical risk tennis media has been so vocal about. Exhibition matches at Stars of the Open aren't played at tournament intensity. They're shortened formats, often featuring mic'd-up players cracking jokes mid-match, built explicitly as entertainment rather than competition. The physical toll of a Stars of the Open appearance, while real, and while absolutely additive to an already loaded schedule, isn't remotely comparable to another full 3-set battle against a top 10 opponent. It's a different category of physical demand entirely, even if tennis media's broader point about cumulative fatigue across an 8-week stretch remains legitimate, regardless of how any single match within that stretch is formatted. Let's also situate this specific night inside the broader arc of what Fan Week at the US Open has become, because it helps explain why an invitation like this carries the weight it does. This year's Fan Week features mixed doubles qualifying, the Mixed Doubles Championship semifinals, and final, a genuinely historic exhibition featuring Roger Federer returning to Arthur Ashe Stadium for the first time since 2019. Playing alongside Andy Roddick against fellow legends Andre Agassi and John McEnroe, and then, immediately following that Legends showcase, Stars of the Open the very next night, spotlighting the sport's next generation. That sequencing isn't accidental. The tournament is explicitly bookending its biggest Legends event with its biggest showcase for rising young talent, a deliberate structural choice that positions Stars of the Open as the torch-passing counterpart to the Federer exhibition happening just 1 day earlier. Being one of only 4 players selected to represent that torch-passing moment on the same stadium court where Federer himself will have played a night before is not a minor honor. It's the tournament publicly signaling exactly who it believes the next chapter of tennis belongs to. There's also something worth saying about what this specific format actually asks of the players involved. Separate from pure physical exertion, because Stars of the Open has historically been less about tennis in its purest competitive sense and more about connection with an audience. Fans in attendance at past editions have specifically praised the intimacy of the format. One attendee at a previous year's event described sitting at the bottom of the stadium during the doubles matches and ending up in a genuine conversation with a stranger seated nearby, calling the whole atmosphere warm and inviting. Another described the event as a way to rewrite a difficult chapter of their own life, attending specifically because of what the night represented emotionally rather than competitively. That's the actual texture of what this event tends to produce. Not tense, high-stakes tennis, but a shared celebratory experience between players and fans that doesn't really exist anywhere else on the tennis calendar. Understanding that texture helps explain why a player already carrying real physical risk into her US Open campaign might still choose to say yes to this specific commitment. It's not simply more tennis. It's an entirely different kind of appearance, one built around visibility, connection, and cultural presence, rather than the grinding, high-intensity competitive tennis that's actually been wearing her down all summer. But none of that erases the very real tension sitting underneath this entire story, and I don't think it should. Even a lower-intensity exhibition format still requires travel, still requires physical presence and warm-up, still requires energy that a body already running on fumes has to find from somewhere. Every hour spent under the lights at Arthur Ashe Stadium on August 27th is an hour that isn't spent recovering, resting, or specifically preparing for a singles campaign that's going to demand far more from her than any exhibition ever could. Tennis media's underlying warning that an 8-week stretch of continuous elite-level obligations is unsustainable for anyone doesn't disappear just because one specific match within that stretch happens to be lower stakes than the rest. So what does it actually mean that nobody asked her to play this match, and she said yes anyway? I think it means something genuinely revealing about how she's chosen to approach this entire, remarkable, exhausting season. She's had every opportunity this year to play it safe, to protect her body, to decline optional appearances in favor of pure competitive focus. She's chosen, again and again, to say yes instead, to the Washington title run that came immediately after Wimbledon with no real break, to the Toronto campaign that followed almost immediately after that, to the Cincinnati draw that came right on the heels of a physically bruising defeat, and now to an exhibition match that carries genuine risk for essentially zero competitive reward. That pattern isn't reckless in the way critics sometimes frame it. It's a specific, consistent philosophy about what this moment in her career actually calls for. She's 21 years old, riding the single best stretch of her professional life, at the exact moment the sport itself has decided to build its own showcase events around her presence. There's a very real argument that opportunities like this, invitations this exclusive, arriving at exactly this moment of momentum, don't wait around for a more convenient, better-rested season to reappear. Saying no to Stars of the Open wouldn't have protected her from every risk sitting on her calendar. It would have simply removed one night of visibility, one night of cultural cementing, one night standing alongside three of the sport's most talked-about young stars on the biggest court in tennis, from a season that's already been defined by her refusal to play it safe. There's also something worth remembering about exactly what happened the last time she walked onto a US Open court carrying real physical risk into the tournament. Last year, a painful shoulder injury cast doubt over her entire campaign just weeks before New York, forcing a withdrawal from Cincinnati and a scramble to recover in time. She arrived anyway, ranking dipped, conditioning uncertain, and became the first Filipino woman in the Open era to win a Grand Slam main draw match, staging a stunning comeback from 5-1 down in the deciding set to beat 14th seed Clara Tauson in front of a crowd she later described as making her feel like she was home, even without a home tournament to call her own. That history doesn't guarantee this particular gamble pays off the same way, but it does mean betting against her finding a way through physical adversity at this specific tournament, on this specific stage, has already been a losing proposition once before. So on August 27th, when the lights come up over Arthur Ashe Stadium and Alex Eala walks out to play a match that carries no ranking points, no direct financial stakes beyond a charitable ticket split, and genuine documented physical risk, given everything already sitting on her calendar, what's actually happening is bigger than the box score of that particular exhibition will ever show. It's a 21-year-old from a country with almost no tennis infrastructure, standing on the same court where legends played the night before, invited there specifically because the sport itself now considers her one of exactly 4 players who represent what comes next. Nobody asked her to be there. She earned the invitation anyway through a season that's made saying yes, again and again, to exactly this kind of opportunity, the defining pattern of her entire career. Whether her body holds up through everything still sitting on the other side of that exhibition, the mixed doubles run alongside Felix Auger-Aliassime, and a full singles campaign at the biggest remaining stage of the year is a question August 27th won't fully answer. But the fact that she's walking onto that court at all, 3 days before the tournament that matters most, tells you everything about how she's chosen to treat a season that's already given her more history-making moments than most players collect across an entire career. She wasn't asked to play this match. She showed up anyway, because at this specific moment, with this specific momentum, and this specific invitation extended to exactly 4 players in the entire sport, saying yes was simply who she's decided to be.